I'm now going to trim out this design, and the first thing I'm going to do, because I've got those little intricate corners in here to get into, is I'm just going to cut the design bigger essentially and get some of this bulk of the felt out of our way, just so that I'm not cutting off a lot at once. It just makes it easier to get into those corners. And you can see I'm just skimming my scissors past just the edge there of where those 12mm cushion cuts are. You can see in this design too, using the black foundation for this particular one, it's created some really nice contrast shadows, especially in the corners where these little two-hole cabs are, and you're seeing little bits of shadow around those bugles as well. When using a black foundation, it's really important that you're using beads that work with the black foundation. If I was going to be using like soft beads or beads that are quite transparent, it can really dull the finish of those beads by putting them on black. But because these beads I've used are quite reflective, you get that real nice shadowy effect framing the work. Okay, let's just trim in a bit closer, and something on an edge like this, you might want to come in from both sides and just trim that away like that, and then come back. Now I'm trying hard not to cut too close because I risk trimming into stitches that are holding this together, so just be a little bit careful. You can turn it over and have a look where your stitches are. Make sure you're not going too close to them. It's definitely much easier to come in from both sides on that little spot. And just, you can see I'm moving the work. I'm not moving my scissors too much, or keeping them in a nice ergonomic position. Now, I can't seem to grip that bit there with the scissors, but you can see I've got a bit of felt there that I want to remove. Now this is a high risk operation, but I do come in sometimes with my thread burner and just melt the foundation away from where it's not quite perfect. It also can help to get rid of any like fuzzy edges, just sort of seals the edge of that and makes that trimming quite nice. If you melt too much of it away, you risk melting your stitches, but you also risk making like a little bulk of plasticky finish where it's melted at the edge there, and it can be tricky to sew through. So keeping in mind, we still need to stitch through this to do an edging. But I think that's looking really nice how I've trimmed that off, and you can see it is quite close, and I'm falling in love with this design more and more as I'm working on it. Come back in with the scissors now. This can sort of leave a bit of a mess on your bead mat. All the bits of felt and foundation coming away. You see that bit's really quite fuzzy where I've cut. So that's a perfect candidate for coming in and just touching it, like I'm barely touching it, shaping the edge of that. I'm hardly even putting the thread burner onto that felt. It is a little bit smelly doing that. You do need to be in a well ventilated area. I quite often, after I've done a little bit of melting like this, open the windows up, put the fan on, even in the winter, just to get that yucky smell out. If you were doing a lot of this kind of work, you probably need to wear something like a respirator. I can't imagine melted felt being too good for your respiratory system. All right, look at that. How cool is that? This would make a really lovely top of a box. Keeping in mind I've still got quite a few, well, 6 bicones I need to use. So now that I've cut this out, to make the back of the work completely flat and not have any of these indentations from where I've been sewing, I like using a piece of template plastic or a bit of recycled plastic inside the work, just to give it a bit of support and also make that backing completely flat. I'll just cut a little bit of this off. This is actually a recycled shopping bag. Sometimes comes with a little piece of this plasticky stuff in the base of the shopping bag, and I save them to use for inside my beadwork. Now I'm going to use my gel pen. Just going to trace around this. And because I don't want to be stitching through this black plastic, I'm going to cut it smaller than where the line is. And that just saves my fingers and my needles when I'm cutting that out. Now, if you had something that, you know, it had to be in a specific orientation, you could create a mark on the work here, a little arrow, and then create the same mark on here, so that you know when you're putting it together, you're putting them facing in that same direction, like that. And I can just trace inside that line. The texture of this plastic is just a little bit bobbly, so it's sort of annoying to draw on. Not too bad though. Alright, so I'm just going to trim this out. I'm just using my regular paper scissors or, you know, cheap scissors for this. I don't want to use my expensive scissors that are going to get damaged by cutting plastic. Certainly wouldn't use my embroidery scissors. And I'm just cutting a fairly basic shape, and then once I've cut it out, I know that that arrow there goes this way, so when I'm putting it together I can lay it together like this. And you can see when I lay that on here, it's just inside from the edge. Now the only spot here where it's not quite in from the edge is just here, so I can get my gel pen and just make a little mark of where I think it just needs a little trim there, just to get it in from the edge, so I'm not worrying about hitting that with my needle. So I think that's a better shape. I'm going to get my E6000 glue and I'm going to just put a generous amount onto this. And I'm using the tip of the glue to sort of spread it out. Like that. And then I'm going to place that down on here like this. I'm going to just apply just a little bit of pressure with my hand for a bit, and then what you can do is rest your beadwork like gently under a book or something. Sometimes I just place it underneath my bead mat itself with a little bit of pressure. Some people don't like having that bit of pressure, but I find it just really helps to make the beadwork dry nice. So I'm going to place this under something while that's drying, and we'll come back shortly. That's been drying for a little while. Now I've got a piece of Ultrasuede. Now this is a beautiful piece of, it's been laser embossed Ultrasuede. I got this from Cranberry Beads here in Australia, and it's so pretty. I just love it. And it's so pretty, I'm too scared to use it until today. Today we are going to use it. So I'm just going to, obviously this is the right side on this one. I'm going to lay this down. So I'm going to be quite economical with this and make sure I'm definitely only using just the amount I do need. I could potentially do a bracelet along the side here later, or do some other pendants with this. And it was a little bit more expensive than the regular Ultrasuede, so I'm being super careful I get my value for money. Alright, so same thing I did before. I'm just doing a little perimeter E6000 glue, and I'm not going really close to the edge of that template plastic because I know that I'm going to be stitching the edges of this and it's going to stick really well. That's going to go there. And I never cut my Ultrasuede out to the size of the piece before I have glued it down. I mean, that's just asking for trouble. It's never going to fit exactly and you won't get as nice a finish. Alright, so I've just roughly cut around that. Same thing again, I'm just going to place this gently under a book with a little bit of pressure on it just until that dries nicely, and we will come back soon and edge this piece. Okay, now this is dry and so I can trim around it, and you can see it's dried really beautifully and flat on the back there. No indentations from stitching or anything, and it's looking really good. So let's just trim around it with the scissors. Try and make it the same as the foundation. I don't want it to be smaller than the foundation because then it becomes tricky to get the edge to look really nice. So just try and avoid cutting it too short. And trimming it to be the same as this shape. You can come back and just, any corners that are a bit rough or a bit sharp, you can just trim a little bit to make them a bit nicer, like that. This corner here I could just do with a little nick in it there, like that. There we go, all trimmed out. Now we need to do a little brick stitch edging on here, which I think will be nice. And I think what I'll do is do a pink around these little 12mm cushion cuts, and then along this section I'm going to do the pewter colour. So the pink I'm going to use is actually going to be the same as what we used for the 15, I think. I pulled these out and they will tie nicely in because we've already used them in the middle there, and then the pewter will go nicely with the central component. Okay, so when I am doing the edging, I like to hide my knot somewhere in the front, so I'm just going to go between those bugle beads and the cup chain, and I've just got a regular burnt knot on the end there. You can see that knot that I've made. Pull that in and that just disappears down in there and not to be seen, so no one will know it's there. Now along these edges I said I'm going to use the pewter. I'll get some of that out. And when you start with the brick stitch edging, you start picking up 2 at a time, and then when you get round to the end you go through that first bead again just to pull it into place. So it quite often doesn't sit quite right until the end. So I picked up my 2 beads, I went through, I'm going to go back through that second bead and pull that up, and you can see it pulls it into the edge. So now I'm just going to pick up 1 bead at a time. I'm going through the foundation and the Ultrasuede, pull it up to the edge, and then go back through the bead in that opposite direction. And it's as simple as that, and just keep going, taking a bit of foundation, pull it up, go back through in the opposite direction. And I find this quite a therapeutic part of the design. It's relaxing to do, I don't have to think too much, and it's rewarding finishing off a component and edging it. So I enjoy this part in a different way to working on the front. It's Looks like that, and you can see on the front we've got that nice edge there to tie in with this colour here. You don't see it right from the very front, but you'll see it when you're wearing it, which I think is quite a nice effect. I could even do a little picot edge, but I think that would be a bit too busy for this design to have a picot on top of what we've already got going on here. So I think just that straight edge will be really nice. So when I get up to this 12mm chaton, we are going to switch to the Duracoat magenta beads just as we go around that corner. I'm always making sure I'm just getting a little bit of each of those layers, a little bit of the foundation and a little bit of the Ultrasuede. And I like the way that the file line thread just disappears down into the Ultrasuede, and you almost can't even see that at all on the edge. I reckon that's the last bead there in the corner, so now I switch to the pink. And nothing special with the stitches apart from just changing colour there. Have a bit of an accent of the pink going around the edge of those stones. I'm going to keep toiling away at this, and I'll bring you back once I have gone all the way around that outside edge, and we'll have a look at how it's looking together. Okay, so I've just come back with the last few beads to stitch on. I think I'm going to need maybe 3 beads here. I can put them on the needle and just measure where they go. I think 3 beads is going to be a good amount for this, and so I'll just put the last 3 on here with you so you can see. And the last one here. Alright, so now I've sewn all the beads on, but I've just got this one bead here that's not sitting quite right. So we need to go through that bead so that we've still got that little thread bridge across the top here. Just passing my needle back to the other side, and I want to do this final stitch through the foundation. It's got caught on a claw of the cup chain there. Unhook that, and then pass it back up through this bead, and then we can knot off the thread. The edging is all done.